The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as William sat in his private study, staring at the letter he had written and rewritten countless times. Kate stood by the window, watching their children play in the garden, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. The weight of the crown had become unbearable, not just for William, but for his entire family. For months, the couple had discussed this moment in hushed conversations after the children went to bed. The relentless media attention, the constant scrutiny, and the impossible expectations had taken their toll. Kate's health had suffered under the pressure, and William watched helplessly as the woman he loved grew thinner and more anxious with each passing day. The final straw came when photographers followed their youngest child to school, frightening the little one so badly that nightmares followed for weeks. William remembered his mother's words about the golden cage of royalty. Diana had warned him that the palace walls, while beautiful, could become a prison. Now he understood what she meant. Every smile had to be perfect, every word measured, every emotion carefully controlled. Their children deserved better than growing up under the harsh glare of public judgment. The decision hadn't come easily. William had spent sleepless nights walking the palace corridors, thinking about his duty to the crown and his duty to his family. He thought about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, and how she had dedicated her entire life to service. He thought about his father, King Charles, who had waited decades for his moment to rule. But most of all, he thought about Kate and their children, and what kind of life they could have away from the spotlight. Kate had been surprisingly supportive when William first broached the subject. She had married into the royal family knowing the challenges, but she hadn't anticipated how difficult it would be to raise children under such intense scrutiny. Every parenting decision was analyzed, criticized, and debated in the media. Their children's every milestone was photographed and dissected by strangers who felt entitled to judge their family. The couple had consulted with trusted advisors, explored legal options, and carefully considered the constitutional implications of their decision. They knew it would send shockwaves through the Commonwealth and beyond. The line of succession would shift, responsibilities would be redistributed, and the monarchy itself would face questions about its future. But William had come to believe that sometimes the most courageous act was to step away. As they prepared to make their announcement, William and Kate reflected on the good times too. Their wedding day, watched by billions around the world, had been magical. The charitable work they had done together had genuinely made a difference in people's lives. They had traveled to incredible places, met extraordinary people, and had opportunities that few could imagine. But the price had become too high. The irony wasn't lost on them that in trying to protect the monarchy by being perfect representatives, they had lost themselves in the process. Kate barely recognized the confident, laughing woman she had been before marriage. William felt the weight of centuries of tradition crushing his spirit. They wanted their children to grow up knowing who they truly were, not just who the public expected them to be. Their staff had been sworn to secrecy as preparations began. Lawyers worked quietly to arrange their affairs. Security details were briefed on new protocols, and most importantly, the children were gently prepared for the changes ahead. The hardest part was explaining to three young minds why Mommy and Daddy needed to step back from being prince and princess. The royal family had been informed privately before any public announcement. The conversations with King Charles had been particularly difficult, filled with disappointment, understanding, and ultimately, a father's love for his son's happiness. Charles had his own memories of feeling trapped by royal duty, though he had chosen a different path. As the final preparations were made, William and Kate found moments of peace in their decision. For the first time in years, Kate's smile reached her eyes when she looked at their children. William slept better, knowing that soon his family would have the privacy and freedom they desperately needed. The world would be shocked, but they had chosen love and family over duty and tradition. The announcement would change everything, not just for them, but for the entire concept of modern monarchy. As they prepared to face the world's reaction, William and Kate held hands knowing they were making the right choice for their family, even if the world might not understand. Their quiet exit would indeed bring tears worldwide, but for the Cambridge family it represented hope for a new beginning away from the golden cage that had held them for so long. The news broke on a quiet Tuesday morning at exactly 9 a.m. London time. Palace staff had worked through the night to coordinate the announcement across all official channels simultaneously. The carefully worded statement appeared on the royal website, social media accounts, and was distributed to news outlets worldwide. Within minutes, the internet exploded with reactions that ranged from disbelief to heartbreak. Kate stood in their private sitting room, watching the news coverage unfold on television. The presenters seemed genuinely shocked, stumbling over their words as they tried to process what they were reporting. Breaking news banners flashed across screens in dozens of languages. The BBC interrupted regular programming, CNN called it historic, and royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades appeared visibly emotional as they discussed the implications. The statement itself was simple, but profound. William and Catherine had decided to step back from their roles as senior working royals to provide their children with a more private upbringing and to focus on their family's well-being. They expressed their deep gratitude for the support they had received and their continued love for the Commonwealth, but emphasized that their primary responsibility was to their children and each other. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of millions of people sharing their thoughts, memories, and emotions. The hashtag #Thank You William and Kate began trending worldwide within hours. People shared photos from royal visits to their communities, stories of how the couple had inspired them, and messages of support for their decision. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many praising their courage to put family first. In living rooms across Britain, families gathered around televisions, many with tears in their eyes. Elderly couples who had watched William grow up from a shy boy walking behind his mother's coffin to a devoted father and husband found themselves crying for reasons they couldn't quite explain. It felt like losing beloved family members, even though they had never met them personally. The international reaction was swift and emotional. In Australia, where William and Kate had toured multiple times, Prime Minister spoke of their lasting impact on the nation. Canadian officials praised their dedication to mental health awareness and Indigenous rights. In New Zealand, the Maori communities they had visited expressed their understanding and support for the family's decision. At a small cafe in central London, longtime royal watcher Margaret Peterson wiped away tears as she explained to reporters why the announcement had affected her so deeply. She had followed every royal tour, collected commemorative items, and felt a genuine connection to the young family. The news felt personal, like saying goodbye to people she had watched grow and change over the years. Children's hospitals across the UK felt the news particularly keenly. Kate had been a frequent visitor, bringing joy and comfort to young patients and their families. The staff at Great Ormond Street Hospital gathered in the break room, sharing memories of her visits and how she had always taken time to speak with every child, no matter how long it took. The couple's charitable organizations issued statements expressing their gratitude for William and Kate's patronage and their hope that the work would continue in some capacity. The mental health initiatives they had championed seemed especially poignant now, as many recognized that their own well-being had been sacrificed in service to others. As the day progressed, more personal reactions began to emerge. Teachers at the children's schools, local shopkeepers who had served them during private moments, and community leaders who had worked with them on various projects all shared stories of genuine, caring people who had tried to make a difference while struggling with their own challenges. The Royal Press Corps, some of whom had covered the family for over a decade, found themselves in the unusual position of reporting on their own emotions. Many admitted to feeling a sense of loss, having watched the children grow up and witnessed the couple's genuine love for each other and their commitment to their roles. Evening news programs around the world led with the story, featuring interviews with royal experts, historians, and ordinary people whose lives had been touched by the couple's work. The tone was universally respectful, with even the most critical voices acknowledging the tremendous pressure the family had faced and their right to prioritize their children's well-being. As night fell in London, crowds had gathered outside Kensington Palace, leaving flowers, cards, and messages of support. The scene was reminiscent of the outpouring of grief for Princess Diana, but this time the flowers were accompanied by messages of hope and understanding. People wrote thank you notes, shared personal stories of inspiration, and wished the family well in their new life. The global reaction confirmed what William and Kate had suspected but hadn't fully grasped. Their impact had been far more profound than they had realized. They had touched millions of lives simply by being authentic, caring, and dedicated to making a difference. Now, as the world processed their departure, it became clear that their legacy would be one of service, love, and the courage to choose family when it mattered most. Behind the palace walls, the royal family gathered for what would be remembered as one of the most emotional meetings in modern royal history. King Charles sat at the head of the mahogany table in the private dining room at Buckingham Palace, his face showing the strain of the past 24 hours. William and Kate sat together, their hands intertwined, while other senior royals filled the remaining chairs around the historic table. The silence was deafening before Charles spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. He began by acknowledging the difficulty of the situation, not just for William and Kate, but for the entire institution of monarchy. The conversation that followed was raw, honest, and filled with years of unspoken tensions about duty, sacrifice, and the price of public service. Princess Anne, ever practical, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking about the constitutional implications. The line of succession would remain unchanged, but the working dynamics of the royal family would shift dramatically. Younger royals would need to take on additional responsibilities, and the monarchy would need to adapt to function with fewer senior members. William's voice broke slightly as he explained their decision to his family. He spoke about watching Kate struggle with anxiety attacks that left her breathless and shaking. He described their children's confusion about why strangers always wanted to take their pictures, and why they couldn't have normal playdates without security assessments. The room listened in stunned silence as he revealed the depth of their private struggles. Kate found her voice when discussing the children's needs. She had researched extensively about the effects of public scrutiny on young minds, and had consulted with child psychologists who confirmed her worst fears. Their eldest was becoming withdrawn and overly concerned with being perfect, while their youngest had developed a fear of crowds. The middle child had asked why people were always watching them, a question that had haunted Kate for weeks. The conversation turned to practical matters as the family began planning for the transition. Security arrangements would need to be modified, official residences would be vacated, and hundreds of patronages would need new patrons. The logistics were staggering, but the emotional weight was even heavier. They were essentially planning the dissolution of the public life they had all known and supported. Camilla, who had her own experience with public scrutiny and media pressure, offered quiet support to Kate. She shared her own struggles with finding balance between public duty and private happiness, acknowledging that she had been older and more prepared for the challenges when she entered royal life. Her words provided some comfort in a room filled with uncertainty. The discussion of their future living arrangements brought both sadness and relief. William and Kate had already begun looking at properties far from London, places where their children could attend local schools and play in their garden without photographers hiding in bushes. The idea of a normal life seemed both foreign and desperately desired. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that this decision had been building for years. William revealed that he had first considered stepping back after the birth of their third child, when the media frenzy around the new baby had overwhelmed their family's ability to bond privately. Kate had suffered from postnatal depression that was made worse by the constant need to appear perfect in public. The family began discussing how to handle the transition publicly. They wanted to maintain dignity while being honest about their reasons. The children would need to be protected from the inevitable media speculation, and the couple wanted to ensure that their departure didn't damage the monarchy they still loved and respected. King Charles made it clear that while he was disappointed to lose such effective working royals, his primary concern was for his son's family's happiness and health. He had his own memories of feeling trapped by royal expectations and understood the courage it took to make such a drastic change. His support, while tinged with sadness, was absolute. The meeting concluded with practical discussions about timing, public statements, and the gradual wind-down of official duties. But the emotional core remained the same, a family grappling with the intersection of public duty and private happiness, trying to find a way forward that honored both their responsibilities and their humanity. As they prepared to leave, William and Kate felt a mix of sadness and relief. The hardest conversation was behind them, and their family had responded with love and understanding even in their disappointment. The path forward was still uncertain, but they no longer felt alone in their decision. That evening, As they tucked their children into bed in what would be their last weeks at Kensington Palace, William and Kate felt something they hadn't experienced in years: hope for the future. The meeting had been difficult, but it had also been healing. Their family understood, the public was supportive, and for the first time in months they could imagine what happiness might look like for their little family away from the public eye. The weeks following the announcement became a whirlwind of farewell visits that took on an almost pilgrimage-like quality. William and Kate had insisted on personally visiting the organizations and communities that had been closest to their hearts during their years of service. Each stop along their farewell tour revealed the deep connections they had forged with ordinary people who had never expected to matter to royalty. Their first official farewell visit was to a children's hospice in Wales, where Kate had been a patron for 7 years. The staff had prepared for a typical royal visit, but what unfolded was something entirely different. Kate spent nearly 3 hours there, far longer than scheduled, sitting with families and listening to their stories without the usual time constraints of royal protocol. She held hands with parents facing unimaginable grief and played simple games with children who found joy in her presence. 8-year-old Lucy, who had been battling leukemia for 2 years, had drawn a picture of Kate with the words, "Thank you for caring," written in crayon. When Kate saw it, tears streamed down her face. She knelt beside Lucy's wheelchair and promised to keep the drawing forever. A moment that photographers captured, and that would become one of the most poignant images of their farewell tour. The couple's visit to a mental health facility in Manchester revealed the depth of William's personal connection to their work. He spoke openly with young people about his own struggles with grief and anxiety following his mother's death. His honesty created an atmosphere where others felt safe sharing their own stories. One teenage boy who had been struggling with depression later told staff that Prince William's words had given him hope that he wasn't alone in his struggles. At a homeless shelter in Birmingham that Kate had visited regularly, the residents had prepared a surprise farewell party. They had saved money from their small allowances to buy flowers and had written individual thank you notes. The shelter's manager explained that Kate never just visited. She remembered names, asked about family members, and followed up on personal situations. Her departure felt like losing a friend who genuinely cared. The couple's work with military families proved especially emotional during their farewell visits. At a base in Norfolk, they met with wives and children of deployed soldiers. William, drawing on his own military experience, understood the unique challenges these families faced. One military spouse, Sarah Johnson, broke down crying as she thanked Kate for the support programs that had helped her cope with her husband's multiple deployments. During a visit to a school in inner London, the children had prepared a special assembly. They sang songs, performed poems, and shared what the couple's visits had meant to their school community. The head teacher explained that royal visits weren't just ceremonial for schools like theirs. They brought attention, resources, and hope to communities that often felt forgotten by the wider world. Each visit revealed stories of genuine impact that went far beyond ribbon-cutting ceremonies. At a community garden project, elderly volunteers shared how Kate's involvement had brought young families into their program, creating intergenerational connections that had transformed their neighborhood. The project had grown from a small initiative to a model that was being replicated across the country. The couple's environmental work took them to a coastal community where William had championed marine conservation efforts. Local fishermen, initially skeptical of royal involvement, had become passionate advocates for protecting their waters after working directly with William. Their farewell gathering on the harbor was filled with weathered men who spoke emotionally about how the prince had listened to their concerns and helped them find solutions. During their visit to a women's refuge, Kate met privately with survivors of domestic violence who had participated in programs she had supported. Their conversations, held away from cameras, revealed the transformative power of having someone in the public eye speak openly about issues that were often hidden in shame and silence. Several women credited Kate's advocacy with giving them the courage to leave dangerous situations. The emotional weight of these farewells began to take its toll on both William and Kate. They found themselves crying in the car between visits, overwhelmed by the realization of how many lives they had touched and how much they would be missed. But they also felt validated in their decision. If their work had meant this much to people, then surely they had given enough. The most challenging farewell came during their visit to a pediatric hospital, where they had been regular visitors for years. Children who had grown up seeing them understood that this goodbye was different. Some were too young to fully comprehend what was happening, but others, particularly the teenagers, grasped the significance of the moment. 15-year-old James, who had been in and out of the hospital for most of his life, presented them with a photo album he had created showing their visits over the years. The progression of images showed not just his growth, but theirs too, from nervous newlyweds to confident, caring advocates who had learned to connect authentically with people facing the most difficult circumstances. As they completed their farewell tour, William and Kate realized that while they were stepping back from official duties, the relationships they had built would endure. These weren't just professional obligations they were leaving behind. They were genuine connections with communities and individuals who had become part of their extended family. The tears shed during these farewells weren't just about endings, but about the profound human connections that had made their royal service meaningful and would make leaving it so difficult. The day of their final official engagement arrived with an autumn chill that seemed to mirror the melancholy mood across Britain. Westminster Abbey, the same ancient church where they had married amid global celebration 12 years earlier, would now witness their final act as working members of the royal family. The service of thanksgiving for their years of service had been planned as a celebration, but the atmosphere carried the weight of a profound farewell. As their car approached the Abbey, thousands of people lined the streets holding handmade signs, flowers, and photographs. The crowd was unlike any typical royal gathering. It included faces from every community they had served. Hospital workers stood next to military families. School children waved beside elderly volunteers, and representatives from dozens of charities they had supported traveled from across the Commonwealth to say goodbye. Inside the Abbey, the congregation was carefully chosen to reflect the breadth of their work. Rather than the usual collection of dignitaries and officials, the pews were filled with people whose lives had been directly touched by the couple's service. In the front row sat Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell, an 82-year-old woman who had met Kate during her first solo engagement 13 years earlier and had followed her journey ever since. The service began with familiar hymns that had been sung at their wedding, but the mood was entirely different. Kate, wearing a deep blue dress that she had chosen specifically because it was the color of hope, walked down the aisle holding William's hand. Their children, now old enough to understand the significance of the day, walked beside them with a solemnity that seemed beyond their years. The Archbishop of Canterbury spoke about service taking many forms and praised the couple's decision to put their family's well-being first. His words resonated through the ancient stone walls as he emphasized that true service sometimes meant having the courage to step away when continuing would cause harm to those we love most. The most moving moment came when representatives from various organizations they had supported spoke about the couple's impact. A young woman who had overcome mental health challenges through programs they had championed spoke with such eloquence about hope and healing that there wasn't a dry eye in the Abbey. Her words reminded everyone present why William and Kate's work had mattered so profoundly. Music had always been important to both William and Kate, and they had chosen pieces that reflected their journey together. As the choir sang, many in the congregation found themselves remembering specific moments from royal visits, charitable events, and public appearances that had touched their own lives in unexpected ways. The couple's final address to the nation was broadcast live from the Abbey steps. William spoke first, his voice steady despite his visible emotion. He thanked the British people and the Commonwealth for their support and understanding. He spoke about the privilege of service and the difficulty of their decision, but emphasized their continued love for their country and its people. Kate's words were more personal, speaking directly to the families, children, and communities they had served. She promised that while their official roles were ending, their commitment to the causes they cared about would continue in different ways. Her voice broke slightly as she thanked the people who had shared their most vulnerable moments with her and taught her about resilience, courage, and hope. The couple's 3 children stood beside them during the address, a powerful reminder of why they had made this choice. The eldest, now old enough to understand the sacrifice their parents were making, reached up to take Kate's hand during an emotional moment. a gesture that spoke volumes about the family's unity in their decision. As they left the Abbey for the final time as working royals, the couple took an unusually long time to greet the crowds. They stopped to speak with people who had traveled from far away to say goodbye, accepting flowers, cards, and messages of support. Many in the crowd were crying, and several times both William and Kate were visibly moved by the outpouring of love and gratitude. The final moments outside the Abbey became deeply personal as children from schools they had visited presented them with a memory book filled with drawings, photos, and messages from thousands of young people across the Commonwealth. Kate knelt down to their level as she accepted the gift, promising to treasure it always. As their car pulled away from Westminster Abbey, the couple looked back at the crowd of people who had come to say goodbye. Many were still waving, some were holding up phones to capture the final moments, and others simply stood in respectful silence, acknowledging the end of an era. The drive back to Kensington Palace was quiet, filled with reflection on the day's significance. Their children asked questions about what would happen next, showing both excitement about their new life and sadness about leaving behind the only world they had known. That evening, as news coverage of the service played around the world, the overwhelming response was one of gratitude and understanding. Social media filled with messages thanking the couple for their service and wishing them well in their new life. The hashtag #ThankYouWilliam and Kate trended globally once again, showing that their impact had reached far beyond Britain's shores. As they put their children to bed in Kensington Palace for one of the last times, William and Kate reflected on the day's events. The service had been both an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of their official royal duties and the start of a new chapter focused on family, privacy, and personal happiness. The tears that had been shed that day weren't just of sadness, but of gratitude for the journey they had shared with millions of people around the world. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of a modest farmhouse in the Cotswolds, where William and Kate had found the peace they had searched for so desperately. The house, with its stone walls covered in climbing roses, and a garden where their children could play without fear of telephoto lenses, had become their sanctuary. The transformation in their family was remarkable. Laughter filled rooms that had once echoed with the tension of public expectations. Kate hummed softly as she prepared breakfast, something she had never had the luxury to do during their royal years. The simple act of making pancakes for her children on a Saturday morning had become precious beyond measure. Their eldest, now attending the local village school, had made friends who invited them over for playdates without requiring security clearances or media advisories. The couple had carefully crafted their new life to balance privacy with meaningful work. They had established a private foundation that continued their charitable efforts, but operated away from the public eye. William had returned to his first love, flying, and worked as a pilot for an air ambulance service, finding deep satisfaction in directly saving lives without fanfare or photographers. Kate had discovered a talent for photography and had begun documenting the beauty of rural life, her pictures capturing moments of authentic joy that had been missing from their lives for years. The local community had welcomed them warmly, appreciating their genuine desire to contribute without seeking attention or special treatment. Their children had blossomed in ways that surprised even William and Kate. The eldest, who had become increasingly anxious about public appearances, now participated enthusiastically in school plays and sports teams. The middle child had developed a love for horses and spent hours at a nearby stable, completely carefree. Their youngest, who had once hidden behind Kate's skirts when cameras appeared, now ran freely through fields and climbed trees with neighborhood friends. The global reaction to their new life had evolved from initial shock to widespread admiration. Media outlets that had once criticized their every move now praised their courage to prioritize family well-being. Their decision had sparked important conversations about mental health, work-life balance, and the price of fame that resonated far beyond royal circles. Regular families around the world found inspiration in their story. Parents struggling to balance career demands with family needs saw William and Kate's choice as validation that sometimes stepping back was the bravest decision. Mental health. Advocates praised them for demonstrating that seeking happiness and protecting family was not selfish, but necessary. The couple maintained carefully limited contact with their former life. They still attended private family gatherings and supported King Charles during personal moments, but their public duties had been completely transferred to other family members. The monarchy had adapted, with younger royals stepping up to fill the void, proving that the institution could evolve and survive significant changes. Their former staff often visited, marveling at the transformation they witnessed. Kate's former private secretary noted that she had never seen the Duchess so relaxed and genuinely happy. William's equerry remarked that the prince had regained the easy smile and quick laugh that had been missing during their final years of royal duty. The village pub where they occasionally enjoyed quiet dinners had become a symbol of their new life. The locals protected their privacy fiercely, understanding that William and Kate had chosen their community precisely because it offered the normalcy they craved. Stories of their kindness and genuine interest in local matters spread throughout the area, earning them deep respect and affection. On quiet evenings, William and Kate often walked hand in hand through the countryside, discussing their journey and marveling at how different their lives had become. The constant anxiety that had plagued their final royal years had lifted, replaced by a contentment they had feared might never be possible. Their children, now able to develop their own personalities away from public scrutiny, showed signs of the confidence and happiness that had been stifled by royal protocol. They played imaginative games, got properly dirty exploring the countryside, and formed friendships based on genuine connections rather than calculated royal relationships. The couple had learned to appreciate small moments that most people took for granted. Kate treasured grocery shopping without security details, while William loved coaching their eldest's football team without photographers capturing every interaction with other children. Their story had become a modern fairy tale with an unexpected twist. Instead of seeking a crown, they had given one up for love and family. The tears that had been shed worldwide during their departure had transformed into admiration for a couple who had redefined what it meant to live happily ever after. As they tucked their children into bed in their countryside home, William and Kate reflected on their journey from palace walls to this simple, peaceful life. They had traded tiaras for homework help, state dinners for family picnics, and public adoration for private contentment. The choice had been difficult, but looking at their children's peaceful faces and feeling the deep satisfaction of a life lived authentically, they knew they had made the right decision. The world continued to watch from a respectful distance, celebrating a love story that had chosen family over duty, happiness over obligation, and private joy over public acclaim. William and Kate had found their happy ending not in a palace, but in the simple beauty of an ordinary life lived with the people they loved most.